Hey, we made it.
We win. But bro, good to see your face again.
Same here, same here. It's good to see you too. All good, all good. How's it going on your side?
Fine, pleasure to finally get you here. I don't know, network connection has been problematic. I don't know if it's with the app update or something else. Well, great to have you here. So good morning.
Same here. Great to be here.
Welcome. Wow, that's a lot of people. So today we're talking about narratives and how they impact human stories. To those listening in, Sheriff Tahir is an expert communicator. He's a storyteller. He's my friend and a fellow dissident. I will disagree on a lot of things.
On dissident, yes.
It's good. I mean, Ranix, I see you, bro. So we're talking about narratives and their effect on human stories. I think this came up because you were the best person to have this conversation with, because I mean, we've all been seeing how our modern day internet is spreading. Since in our last conversation, we tried to talk about ideologies and the drive. I mean, for me, from my perspective, things have been insane. Yeah, I know some things are supposed to be disrupted, but it's almost as though we're all just in this very wild rat race, and everybody's chasing the next big trend, and the trends keep coming and just keeps directing us to whatever agenda is being sold at the moment. So, but I would like to hear your side. What do you think? How has the ecosystem of communication and mass media been these days?
I mean, first is to simplify it, right? By what do we mean when we say narratives? And narratives are just stories that we tell ourselves, stories that helps us to shape, understand, document, and sometimes even create our world. So this is it, right? And this form of storytelling has moved through the ages. So you have from oral to writing to visual, audio-visual, digital, and then the internet has just brought this new platform-based storytelling that we see on social media. So that's kind of the journey. But narratives have always been there, and it just means when a story is told to you and it's narrated to you. And what is in consideration here is the form or the format, the method, and sometimes the technology that is used to narrate to you. An example would be, for a Nigerian context, Nollywood. So it produces a lot of movies that have narratives embedded in them. And these narratives could be cultural, social, sometimes political, and that's a bit how it is. It's stories that carry messages and meanings, and they are not new, right? Holy books like the Bible and the Quran have they're books of stories, that just sort of have moral arcs in them to shape our behavior as humans. But what you're particularly interested in is two parts. One is how do these narratives affect us? If we find ourselves holding on to some unhealthy narratives, for example, narratives about gender roles, where we imagine that one gender is less or inferior to the other, narratives around race, or narratives around conflict, when you have East versus West, North versus South, good versus bad, and it creates these types of divide. And because they've always been there, it's not a problem. I guess what's interesting is now we are being ushered into a new age of how storytelling, how storytelling has changed. And I would just touch on what is the biggest change. In the past, we have narratives taking this sort of linear approach where your parents tell you stories about their own parents or your own culture, and then they transfer knowledge to you. So it's always being received in a way and then transferred from one party to another, a bit institutionally. You have big media platforms like BBC telling you stories, or CNN, or Discovery Channel telling you about animals and that. What is essentially, what is very different right now is that for the first time, we are able to tell our own stories because of social media. So it's now an atmosphere that is user generated. You know, we tell stories about ourselves. We're able to host this conversation, which would not have been possible 20 years ago. You would have to belong to an institution or a big media platform to have the tools to be able to have this conversation. And so that's where much of the changes are happening, in drifting from where one institution is telling you the stories and moving to where you can tell stories about yourself. I don't know if that sort of answers the question
so
you had.
No, I mean it's more like
I know.
So,
it's also in my head too.
I wanted to pull out something. Thanks for the book at the Girl Unplug. So I was able, I forgot to add Sheriff is an avid reader, maybe worse than I am. It's anti-fragile, and I like most of his concepts. And I mean, these were things that we discussed even before we saw some of them being written in books. But he made mention of something which I want to ask, or I want us to talk about more of African context. So in passing, where we've used oral tradition and it was basically linear, and now we have this dynamic where one experiences social media goes viral and it's like, this is the biggest thing on earth. However, Nassim seems to postulate that oral tradition is the strongest means of communication. So when I came across question was in my head, what ran through my head was that, for example, we in our part of the world, we basically pass down a lot of instructions via this linear model. Very little things were written down, which means that we have very little history that we can say was documented. As